All right, so um, let's dive into something really intense this time around. Olympic field hockey.
Oh, yeah. Now you're talking pressure.
Mm.
2 weeks. I mean,
To achieve what most athletes work their entire lives for, it's incredible.
and, we talk about the athletes, but imagine being the coach.
Oh, man.
Every single decision you make, every substitution, scrutinized, potential headline.
Absolutely. And the stakes, they don't get much higher than that, right?
No, they don't.
So we're really lucky to be diving into conversations with two coaches who were just in that very arena in Paris.
Yeah.
Katrina Powell, who led the Hockeyroos,
Mm-hmm.
and Shane McLeod, formerly the head coach, and recently the assistant coach for the Red Lions of Belgium.
And I think what's so fascinating about hearing from both of these coaches is the contrast in their recent journeys. So you have Powell, it's her first Olympics as head coach, and facing some really, really difficult public scrutiny during the team selection.
Yeah.
And then McLeod,
Right.
he's stepping back from that top spot after leading the Red Lions to gold in Tokyo.
Wow. Yeah. It's almost like two sides of the same coin.
It is.
That same high-pressure coin. Powell actually talks about, the months leading up to the games.
Yeah.
Just this no time to waste mentality. And it made me realize, the Olympics, that's not where these athletes suddenly find another gear.
Right.
They're already redlining it just to get there.
McLeod actually echoes that, and he really highlights how different this beast is, this Olympic beast. He was talking about the tournament schedule and how you can't really prepare for the emotional whiplash of it.
Oh.
He said in Tokyo, for example, his Red Lions, they faced Germany and then the Netherlands back to back.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, talk about trial by fire, top contenders right out of the gate. But then in Paris, totally different. It was lower ranked Ireland and New Zealand first.
It's like going from, 0 to 60 in a heartbeat.
Yeah. You're fine-tuning 1 minute, and then the next, you are in a knockdown, drag-out, fight for Olympic survival.
Yeah. And speaking of pressure cookers, we have to talk about Powell's experience with team selection. To have an athlete, and this is extremely rare,
Yeah.
to have an athlete take legal action after being cut from the team.
I can't even imagine. That's every coach's nightmare.
It's heartbreaking, and you can hear it in her voice when she talks about it.
Yeah.
Just the bond that these athletes share. Years of training together, the friendships. It's not just a roster, it's a tight-knit group.
And she uses this phrase, absolutely devastating, and it's clear she means it. For everyone involved, including those who were selected. Because now you're carrying the weight of dreams, both fulfilled and shattered.
Oh, man, that's heavy.
But Powell also makes it really clear. The coach's duty, it's to the team's success.
Right.
As tough as those calls are, you have to pick the group that you believe has the very best chance of bringing home the gold.
And then that pressure, it just intensifies as you move through the tournament. Both coaches actually talk about that shift. From pool play, where every single point matters, to that sudden death of the knockout stage.
Right.
How do you prepare a team for that?
It's got to be so hard. McLeod, actually, he doesn't mince words. He's like, the quarterfinals, that's where the real tournament begins.
Oh, yeah. The teams have found their rhythm by that point.
Okay.
The stakes are sky high. And, one loss, you're done. You're on the plane home.
It's over.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting was Powell's approach to that.
Oh.
She really focuses on instilling a mindset where every single game is treated as the most important.
Oh, wow.
That way, the approach doesn't have to drastically change when they hit quarterfinals.
Right, because it's already like that.
Exactly.
Consistency is key. Don't get me wrong, the energy is different in a knockout game.
Oh, of course.
But if you've been treating every match like it's do or die, then that pressure, it's familiar.
It's about building that mental resilience over time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, neither of these teams achieved their ultimate goal in Paris. The Hockeyroos, they went out to China in the quarterfinals, and the Red Lions, well, they were upset by Spain and theirs.
Yeah. Heartbreak all around. So let's dig into their post-Olympics reflections a little bit.
Okay.
Powell, she talks about this disappointment of inconsistency.
Yeah.
They had a good team, but that top level of play, it wasn't always there. But I think what really struck me was her pride in their fighting spirit. She gives this example of coming back from 2-0 down against Argentina.
Wow.
And that's the kind of grit, that's the kind of determination that you can't teach.
Right. It's that refusal to give up.
Yeah.
Even when the odds are completely stacked against you. That's character.
That's character. And speaking of character, McLeod's reflections, I think, are really insightful here. Okay.
He talks about how, and I found this fascinating, he talks about how the Red Lions' dominance may have actually worked against them.
Wait, how can being dominant be a bad thing? Explain that.
So they became the team to study, to emulate.
Right, okay.
And as a result, McLeod suggests that maybe, just maybe, they became a little complacent, a little less hungry for that radical change. Everyone else was playing catch-up, trying to crack their code.
So it's like they became the benchmark, which is great.
Right.
But it also means you need to evolve faster than ever before.
Precisely. McLeod actually uses the phrase, I love that he says, the studied rather than the surprising.
Ooh, I like that.
And that, I think, is the challenge for any team, or any individual for that matter, operating at the top of their game. How do you stay ahead of the curve when everybody is gunning for you? That's a fascinating question. And it seems like both of these coaches have some interesting thoughts on how to do just that.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I want to take a step back and look at how the game itself is changing. So we've got these two brilliant coaches, Powell and McLeod, both at the top of their game, both witnessing this evolution of field hockey firsthand. What were some of the big trends they noticed at the Paris Olympics?
Well, both of them picked up on this shift towards a more defense-oriented game.
Yeah, more tactical, more structured for sure.
Exactly. A lot more emphasis on, shutting down the opposition rather than this, I guess, free-flowing attack.
Yeah, and maybe even fewer of those like jaw-dropping moments of individual brilliance.
Right. Like, where did all the crazy attacking skills go?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is the sport shifting in that direction? And is that going to alienate fans who love those highlight reel plays?
It's a valid concern, and McLeod actually voiced that. He's worried that the current rules, especially those regarding aerials, are contributing to this, like those long passes.
Well, you mean like lifting the ball and carrying it through the air?
Yeah, exactly. And he's saying those rules are making the game more congested, more about possession, less about those daring runs and shots on goal.
So fewer goals being scored.
Yeah, which, let's be honest, can make for a less exciting spectator experience. He even proposed some pretty radical changes, actually.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like getting rid of aerials into the circle altogether. Right. Or, how about this? Experimenting with a true dangerous play rule. Like really letting players attack without being penalized for every little challenge. He wants to inject that excitement back into the sport, to make it more appealing, especially to people who are new to field hockey.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody understands what's going on, they're not going to watch it.
Exactly.
It's that classic tension in sports, right?
Yeah.
Tradition versus innovation.
Yeah.
How do you honor the history and the fundamentals of the game while also adapting and evolving to keep things fresh?
100%. And it's not just about the rules. It's also about the tactics and the skills that coaches are emphasizing. Which, speaking of, remember Powell mentioning that tactical adjustment she makes during games?
Vaguely.
She called it like a different mindset, but then wouldn't elaborate.
That's she's got a secret weapon.
Right. What is it? Could it be a subtle shift in their positioning, maybe a change in their pressing intensity? Or am I way off? Maybe it's even like a secret phrase she whispers to her players to throw the other team off.
Oh, a mental cue. I like that. Bit of a psych out.
Yeah.
But that speaks volumes, though, about the experience and knowledge that these coaches possess.
Definitely.
They are thinking several steps ahead, constantly searching for that tiny advantage, that edge that could make all the difference.
It's like they're playing 3D chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers.
And they have to be adaptable, too, because things can change so quickly in a game. Remember McLeod talking about how the Red Lions communicate tactical changes during a game?
Yeah.
They often use substitutions as a chance for more in-depth instructions. Like that player's coming off, they get a quick download of info, then boom, right back into the action.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a pit stop in Formula One.
It's brilliant. I love that analogy.
They shift their entire approach seamlessly in the span of, what, like 3 or 4 minutes?
McLeod actually broke it down. He said, when players come off, you get an opportunity to say, okay, next time you're on, we're going to be moving into this type of system. So very quickly, within 3 or 4 minutes, you actually have a team that's gone from one emphasis to moving into another.
That's incredible. Yeah. But, that highlights the level of trust and understanding that needs to exist between those coaches and players, right?
Yeah, 100%. That kind of communication, that shared understanding, it only comes with time and mutual respect. And on that note, I think it's worth talking about McLeod's transition to assistant coach.
Oh, yeah, especially working under his longtime assistant, Michelle Vanderheuvel.
Right. That's a unique dynamic. Like, how often do you see that kind of role reversal at the elite level?
Not very often, and you have to wonder, was there any, awkwardness, any tension with that shift?
Honestly, McLeod makes it seem like it was a pretty smooth transition, which speaks volumes about their relationship. He talks about van der Heuvel as a critical friend, someone he trusts to challenge his assumptions and offer a different perspective, even if it means disagreeing with him.
I mean, that's what you want, though, right? Someone to be brutally honest with you.
Absolutely.
Because, as McLeod said, the head coach is just the face and the representative of many people.
It's a team effort all the way through. And speaking of teams, remember what Powell said about picking the right mix of personalities. It's not just about individual skill, it's about finding those players who complement each other, who buy into that team-first mentality.
Which is something that needs to be fostered from a young age.
Totally. It reminds me of what Powell said about the challenge of getting young players to focus on the fundamentals, especially on defense.
The less glamorous side of the game.
Right. But crucial for success. She said something like, often the best defenders, you don't even notice them.
Yeah, they're the unsung heroes.
Exactly. They're doing the dirty work, making those crucial tackles, interceptions.
And it's about repetition, right? Drilling those fundamentals until they become second nature. Remember McLeod's words. The biggest thing is training things that you use in a game repeatedly. If it happens once every 6th game, don't train it. It's going to happen anyhow. But the stuff that happens constantly in games, you just have to become the master of those things.
It's like that saying, practice makes perfect. But it's not just about mindless repetition. It's about purposeful practice. Identifying those high-frequency skills and honing them until they become automatic. And that goes for coaches, too. McLeod talked about how he's always listening to podcasts like ours, always seeking out new information, new perspectives, new ideas.
He even mentioned surrounding himself with those critical friends.
Exactly, because even at the highest level, you can't afford to get complacent. The game is always evolving, the players are always learning, and as a coach, you have to stay ahead of the curve.
It's about lifelong learning, isn't it?
100%. And it's not just about strategy and technique. It's about understanding the mental side of the game. Like McLeod said, about creating that emotionally safe but emotionally challenging environment. It's about letting players take risks and make mistakes, but also providing them with the support and guidance they need to learn and grow from those experiences. It's that ability to connect with players on a human level, to understand their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and aspirations. That's what separates the good coaches from the great ones.
It's that emotional intelligence, right? Knowing when to push and when to hold back, when to offer a word of encouragement, and when to just let the silence do the talking.
Exactly. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of empathy. But that leads right into this other crucial aspect we touched on, creating that psychologically safe environment for athletes to really push their limits.
Where they're not terrified to take risks, to maybe even screw up a little.
Right. McLeod actually used this phrase. I wrote it down because I loved it so much. He said, you need to make it emotionally safe, but emotionally challenging.
Oh, I like that a lot.
It's not about coddling them. It's about giving them the space to experiment, to make mistakes, but with that safety net of knowing that you've got their back.
So they can learn and grow from those experiences without the fear of being, like, publicly shamed or ridiculed or,
Right. It should be okay to fail as long as you're learning from it, which brings us back to something we keep coming back to. Those foundational skills. Powell especially, she was adamant about this. She was like, you have to be good at hockey. And at first I was thinking, well, yeah, obviously.
Right. Isn't that a given at this level?
Right. But then she went on to break it down, to explain just how technically demanding this sport really is. All those subtle movements with the stick, the spatial awareness, the split-second decision-making.
It's easy to overlook all of that when you're watching, right?
Absolutely. You see the flashy goals, the big hits, but you don't see the thousands of hours that went into mastering those fundamentals.
Because those moments of brilliance, they don't just happen. They're built on a foundation of, like, relentless repetition.
Exactly. And remember what McLeod said about his training philosophy. He said, and I quote, "The biggest thing is training things that you use in a game repeatedly. If it happens once every 6th game, don't train it. It's going to happen anyhow. But that the stuff that happens constantly in games, you just have to become the master of those things."
It's about efficiency, right? Don't waste your time on things that only come up once in blue moon. Focus on those high-frequency skills, those little things that make a big difference over time.
It's like those musicians who spend hours practicing scales, or those painters who obsess over brushstrokes.
It's the relentless pursuit of perfection in those seemingly small, maybe even boring foundational elements. But that's where true artistry comes from.
And that's what's so inspiring about both of these coaches. Even at the highest level, they never stop learning. They never stop refining their craft. I mean, McLeod was talking about listening to podcasts.
Maybe even this one. You never know.
Right. But it's that humility, that willingness to keep an open mind, to keep searching for those little edges that makes them so successful.
It's about surrounding yourself with people who will challenge you.
Yes. Who will tell you when you're wrong, who will push you to be better. Remember what Powell said. Coaches need that support too. They need time to develop, to experiment, to really build something special.
Instead of just being pressured to win right away.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important point. Because if we only focus on short-term success, then we're missing out on the long game.
We're sacrificing long-term growth, both for the individual athletes and for the sport itself.
Exactly. It's about nurturing that love for the game, that passion, that drive to be the best you can be. And that's something that both Powell and McLeod really emphasize.
That passion really shines through in these interviews. You can tell they care deeply, not just about winning, but about developing the next generation of players and coaches.
They both talked about that. Like, that's part of their legacy, passing on that knowledge, that love of the game.
And speaking of legacies, I wanted to touch on one last anecdote from Powell that I found particularly insightful. She was asked about how she handles those high-pressure moments during a game. Specifically, those short breaks at quarter time and halftime.
Oh, yeah, when the clock stops and the pressure's really on.
Yeah, and you've got, like 2 minutes to convey the most important information to your players? How do you even begin to do that?
What do you say in those moments?
Right. Powell was very clear about the need for, clarity and conciseness. She said at that level, there's no time for these long-winded speeches or complex diagrams. It's about laser focus on the one or two most critical adjustments.
And even with those formal breaks, sometimes it's still not enough, right?
Right. She actually said, although we have quarter time now, sometimes that's too long. You've got to be able to do it on the field.
Wow.
She's talking about that in-the-moment adaptability, right? The ability to read the play and make adjustments as you go.
Without having to wait for instructions from the coach.
Exactly. And she was very clear about valuing players who can problem solve on the go.
Who not only understand the plan, but can also see when it's not working and make those adjustments in real time, because that's often the difference between winning and losing at the highest level.
It's those tiny little decisions, those in-the-moment adjustments that can completely change the course of a game.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really powerful takeaway for anyone listening, even if you're not a professional athlete or a coach. It's about cultivating that ability to be adaptable, to think on your feet, to trust your instincts, and to be that problem solver.
It's about embracing the unexpected and finding those opportunities in the chaos.
Beautifully said.
So to bring this all back to our deep dive today, we've talked about the pressures of coaching at the highest level, the constantly evolving tactics and techniques of field hockey. But ultimately, it seems like it all comes down to a few key things. Mastery of the fundamentals, tactical flexibility, that in-the-moment adaptability, and those incredible bursts of individual brilliance.
And don't forget the crucial role of the coach. It's about creating that environment where all of that can flourish, where players feel safe to take risks, to push their boundaries, where they're encouraged to be students of the game, to never stop learning and growing.
Because that's how you build something truly special, not just a winning team, but a legacy. And as we've heard from Katrina Powell and Shane McLeod, it's a journey that never really ends.
So the next time you watch a field hockey match, I encourage you to really pay attention. Look beyond just the score or the flashy plays. Watch how the teams adapt, how they communicate, how they handle those pressure-filled moments. Because that's where the real beauty of this sport lies.
It's in those subtle details, in those moments of brilliance, in the constant battle for every inch of the pitch. That's the magic of field hockey.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of elite field hockey coaching. We hope you've gained a new appreciation for this incredible sport and maybe even picked up some inspiration to apply to your own life.
Whether you're an athlete, a coach, or just someone who appreciates the pursuit of excellence, remember, stay curious, stay adaptable, and never stop pushing yourself. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.